Hello and welcome. In today's video we'll be looking at just one single thing, and that thing is this lens. This lens is the Tokina ATX Pro 28-70 2.8. This is a great zoom lens for any full frame or APS-C camera, and it has manual focus, manual aperture control depending on which version you buy, and manual zoom. The main question about this lens that people have is whether it is parfocal or not. Now, parfocal means when I zoom in and zoom out, does the focus change? So when I zoom in, focus, and zoom out, does the focus shift backwards or forwards? Now, many zoom lenses suffer from this, so if I zoom in, focus and zoom out, and just shoot, assuming that it's going to be sharp, there's a high chance it will not be. Now, as you can see, I have a follow focus here, just for the zooming in and out, and I'll be focusing with my hands. This lens suffers from a very short throw focus ring that is here. It is like 50-60 degrees from infinity to the minimum focus, so that is the only disadvantage, but you could also consider it to be an advantage. So if you're a single person shooting and you don't really have time to pull focus all the time, or you don't have another extra follow focus to attach for the focus, you could just wiggle around a little with your fingers and it will be in focus. Now, enough talking. Let's switch to the Parfocal test. So, here we have some cacti, and I will be focusing on one of these, and I'll be zooming in and out to see whether it stays in focus or not. I have an external screen just for focusing on the Fuji X-T3, and what we will be doing is I'll be filming in the highest compression, highest quality possible, and I'll digitally zoom in post to show you what's gonna be happening with the focus. Now let's go ahead. Okay. I'm also shooting with a higher shutter speed to have the aperture fully open. With the aperture fully open, we will have a shallower depth of field, therefore it will be easier to spot any focus shifts we might have. So on that cactus, we are in focus, the one in the center. Oh, let me point up. Not. So I am in focus here on this one, and let us now slowly zoom out. Now, as you can see, there is not really a drastic change in focus. It is changing, that is important, because that just proves that it's not parfocal, but let us not forget that it's really hard to have a parfocal lens in this price category. This lens sells for like 200 euros, so you're gonna have a hard time trying to find a parfocal lens in that price range anyways. Now, I will be correcting the focus here, and it's just a tiny twist with my finger to be back in focus on that cactus. And when I zoom back in, it is out of focus. As you can see now, the thing that's in focus is the cactus on the left. Now the cactus on the left is in focus, but like just with a small turn, I have the cactus back in focus. Now let's close down the aperture. So this is now at f4, and at f4, let's see if it's parfocal-ish. Now it's still not perfect, but it is getting there. So let's close down to 5.6. At 5.6, It's not perfectly in focus, but it is in the focus range, so it's in that depth of field range I have. So at 5.6 I'd be happily zooming in and out. Now what you can do for this, now I'll show you that trick, is while focusing I will front focus. So when I zoom in and I focus, I will front focus and then I will zoom out. And when I zoom out, it back focuses. So it will kind of be an in-between. So as you can see, the cactus is kind of in focus, but kind of not. And when I zoom out, it's about the same. So this was the lens working at its minimum focus of like 0.7 meters to a meter. Now I will move back a little. We are a bit further away, and at this distance of about, I would say 2 meters, 2.5 meters, this is the distance you would use this lens at. This lens is not a lens that you're gonna go very close up with, because the minimum focus is 0.7 meters, and for a zoom lens you really don't want to be that close anyways, because like I would like to have the option to zoom in for a close-up and zoom out to capture the entire scene, and this lens gives you that. And this would be the distance I would use this lens at. So I will actually do the same test again on the same cactus, and let's see what happens. Okay, I'm in focus. Now I'm gonna zoom out. You can see that the focus changed just a little bit, and I can correct that by just twisting the focus a little, and there we go, we're in focus. Now let's try this at f4, because I think at f4 it has the potential to work. As you can see, it's not perfect, okay? It's not perfect. It's still a cheap lens, but it can do it. At f4 you can easily zoom in and out, and it's going to stay in focus, and that's the important thing here. So let's move on to the other aspects of this lens, because this video is mainly about the parfocalness of this lens, but there are other pros and cons that I need to mention, because if you're buying this lens just because of parfocal, you might be disappointed. So let's move on to those. About this lens, what is this lens? So this lens is a photography lens from, I think, the 80s or the 90s, and it was designed by Engineer, and that's a big cinema lens company, and they made it for Tokina so they could produce it cheap or something like that. And this does not feel cheap. It might have some plastic rollers inside for the focus mechanism. It might not be able to survive forever. It might not be able to survive every impact, but it is good for what it is. Now we have a 77mm filter, and the lens actually never comes out or in, because the entire zoom mechanism and the focus mechanism is inside this housing. And that's a good thing, because you don't want your lenses to be moving in and out as you are using them for a cinema setting. The big disadvantage of this lens, in my opinion, is the focus. The focus throw is so little, and that means that you can easily knock the focus off by just twisting it a tiny bit. The other disadvantage that I have found, sadly, controlling the aperture is not necessarily being able to use the aperture. Now this aperture inside, it has a tiny little movement, and it goes from very bright to very dark. So I basically used the histogram in the camera to see what aperture I'm at. There is no writings on this ring. It is a cheapo adapter, and that is going to be a problem if you are going to use this in a professional setting. Now, I don't think anybody's going to be using this in a professional setting. Who is this lens for, right? This lens is for the videographer that is looking for a nice vintage zoom lens that is going to be a single, you know, you could put a black mist filter on this, and that's going to be your one single run and gun lens. And that's going to work amazing. And who is this not for? If you are a pixel peeper and you really want that parfocalness in your lenses, this lens is not going to make you that happy. It is parfocal-ish at f4 at a reasonable distance. If you want to do close-ups and want to keep it parfocal in that close-up, you're not going to manage to do that. It really doesn't breathe that much. I have not been able to see any breathing myself, and it creates amazing images. It is not going to be matching up with a modern lens, a modern zoom lens that's made for cinema, but it will create images where you will not be able to see that big of a difference between a modern cinema zoom lens and this one. So it is good. To sum it up, do I recommend it? Yes, I do. If you are a person that shoots like weddings and you really don't want to, you know, mess around with all that digital zoom stuff. I'm talking about digital zoom lenses here where they zoom in, but then the focus just wiggles just a tiny little bit to annoy you. With this one, there is no wobble, there's no such thing, so you can easily zoom in and out. It creates a nice warm tone in the image, and that is really pleasant for me. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from this video. I hope that I have affected your decision on buying or not buying this lens. I am a primes person usually, but with this lens you might not need that many primes. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next camera related video.